Hello and welcome. Today we talk about a big topic, integration. But wait a moment. Let's leave the political debate aside for a moment. Instead, we will look at integration from a different perspective, a psychological one. Because if you think about it, integration is basically something very human, the feeling of belonging. So let's begin. Sounds simple, right? But think for a moment. What is the first answer that comes to your mind? I guess for many of you the answer was some kind of group you belong to. And that is not a coincidence. These group memberships are like building blocks from which we create our self-image, our identity. You can imagine identity like a puzzle. Each piece represents a group you identify with. But what does it actually mean to identify with a group? This is where the research of Ashforth and Mael becomes interesting. Identification is much more than just a label. It is a deep inner feeling of sharing something with others. Think about it. When your favorite sports team wins, you feel like a winner yourself. And when the company you work for is criticized, you might take it personally. That is social identity in action. And here is the key point. This way of thinking in terms of us and them is not a conscious decision. Our brain is basically programmed to organize the world like this. It is a very basic psychological mechanism. The process usually happens in 3 steps. First, we categorize. We sort ourselves and others into groups. Second, we identify. We choose a group and say, this is me, this is part of who I am. And third, we compare. We want our own group, the in-group, to look good, ideally even better than other groups, the out-groups. The important thing is that this happens automatically, all the time, in the background, without us noticing it. You can think of it as a mental tool that helps us understand a very complex social world and find our place in it. Without this system of sorting, we would honestly be quite lost. And this brings us back to the topic of integration. If the need to belong to a group is so deeply rooted in us, then the real question is not whether people want to belong. The real question is, how can people build a new or additional sense of belonging? That is the real driving force behind successful integration. This quote describes it perfectly. We all have the motivation to belong to groups that make us feel good and proud. Our self-esteem is closely connected to the status of our groups. And the important point is, this applies to everyone. We all need it. Here you can clearly see the psychological difference. If we feel like part of the in-group, we experience positive things, loyalty, pride, cooperation. But if we are labeled as part of an out-group, suddenly very different feelings appear: distance, insecurity, and the unpleasant feeling of being reduced to a stereotype. And this is the major challenge in integration. If people do not see a realistic chance to become part of a new in-group, to expand their identity, then the whole process slows down. The fundamental human need to feel good as part of a valued group becomes blocked. So what does this mean for us? What can we do? The good thing is that social identity theory does not only explain the problem, it also gives us practical tools. Tools to build bridges instead of building new walls. The key question is therefore not whether people want to belong. As we have seen, they do. The real question is, how do we open the door? How can we, as a society, as an organization, or even in our local communities, open the doors to belonging? Here is a kind of toolbox based on the theory. First, recognize existing identities instead of devaluing them. It is not about saying, leave everything behind, but about saying, bring who you are with you. Second, communicate clear and open rules. What defines us as a group? What are our values? Clarity creates security. Third, and this is very important, redefine we. Is our we really about origin, or about shared values, goals, and interests? If we change this perspective, the group becomes much more open. And fourth, create opportunities for cooperation. Nothing connects people more than working together on shared projects. Cooperation builds stronger bonds than competition. And this is not just common sense or simple psychology. All these ideas are based on solid scientific research, a theory that helps us understand what really motivates people. So let's summarize. What does all this mean for our understanding of integration? Perhaps the most important message is this: integration is not a one-way street. It is not a process where someone is expected to give up their old identity. It is an identity process. It means expanding identity, seeing oneself as part of something new without erasing the old. You simply add a new piece to the puzzle instead of removing an old one. Belonging is therefore not the reward at the end of a long integration process. It is the starting point, because once the feeling, "I belong here," exists, engagement, cooperation, and participation often follow naturally. And this brings the responsibility back to all of us. This psychological perspective gives each of us concrete ways to make a difference, in our workplaces, our communities, and our neighborhoods. The question is not only what others should do. The real question is, which bridge will you build? And which bridges can we build together? Today we discussed a study by Blake Ashforth from 1989. If you have questions or topic suggestions, feel free to write to youtube@empowermigra.com. EmpowerMigra, understanding begins with listening.